I want to talk about the Jaguars and Tom Coughlin. And it's an old story, I admit it. But I never talked about it when it happened, and I had to do a lot of research to try to understand what in fact did happen between Tom Coughlin and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so number one, you got to know who Tom Coughlin is. Tom Coughlin used to be the New York Giants head coach. He won 2 Super Bowls as the Giants head coach. He's kind of a hero. He's a well-respected man in the world of football. He's a very respected figure in the football world. And after his time with the New York Giants, he took a job with the Jacksonville Jaguars as their chief football executive. Basically, he was in charge of all football operations in Jacksonville with the Jaguars. And earlier in December, mid-season, the Jaguars suddenly fired him. And I was like, what? What happened? Like, I get it, the Jaguars weren't winning a lot, but it felt like something clearly went on with the Jaguars. And then I heard a lot of rumblings, and I learned a lot in the process of doing research, and a lot has come out about the Jaguars and Tom Coughlin's time with them. And it's very interesting. Here's what happened. First of all, we learned that, Tom Coughlin, from his time in New York to now, he's always been known as a strict head coach. You hear Michael Strahan tell stories about dealing with Tom Coughlin and how they butted heads because he was such a strict head coach in New York with the Giants. But attention to detail has always been really, really incredibly important to Tom Coughlin. And sadly, this time, I think, he took things clearly way too far. Here's what I learned. 3 days before the Jaguars fired him, the NFL Players Association sent a letter to all NFL players informing them that over 25% of all grievances filed against NFL teams were filed against one team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Over 25% of all the grievances filed to them were about the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the NFLPA was warning players, be careful when you choose your next NFL team to be a part of. And the message was clear, stay away from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Jaguars realized, oh, crap, we have a nightmare on our hands. They were going to have a hard time attracting free agents unless they made a change immediately. And so the Jags owner, Shad Khan, said that he'd already planned to part ways with Tom Coughlin, but this letter from the NFLPA seemed to accelerate the process, and they immediately fired Tom Coughlin. And these are some of the details I have learned since hearing about the Jaguars. First of all, Tom Coughlin fired players like crazy. He once fined Dante Fowler over $700,000 for missing treatments during the 2018 offseason. And they were mad that he wasn't doing treatment with their facility at their training facility. And an NFL arbiter actually ruled that the Jaguars, you can't fire a player for missing off-season appointments. Now, basically, Tom Coughlin was too strict. He had this death grip on the franchise. And personally, I agree with fining players for missing mandatory meetings. I played college football. You got to punish guys if they're late. You got to punish guys for not showing up, for missing workouts or missing appointments, whatever it is. There has to be consequences for not being disciplined as a football team. However, number one, the expectations got to be clear. You got to know the consequences all the time. And Tom Coughlin took it way too far. He once fined Dante Smoot for missing a breakfast meeting. He fined him $25,000. That's an excessive amount. In most places, that would be a $1,000 or $2,000 fine. $25,000 is insane for missing a morning meeting. And that constant kind of oppression, I can't think of a better word, that constant oppression does not breed a healthy workplace environment. And, to make matters worse, the expectations were not clear. That's really the cardinal sin here, is that players were not clear what was expected of them, other than you better not be late, you better not miss anything, and you got to be... First of all, the Jaguars' clocks were set 5 minutes early because everything was... You had to be earlier. You had to be 5 minutes earlier or else you were late to a meeting, which is just weird and whatever. But once Leonard Fournette was fined $99,000 for sitting on the bench during a game and appearing uninterested. That's what the fine said from Tom Coughlin. And here's the kicker. Leonard Fournette wasn't playing in the game. He was injured. He was on the sideline. He wasn't playing. He was hurt. And he was sitting on the bench, appearing uninterested. I don't know about you. If you ever been at a football game, not playing, it's brutal. It hurts your soul. You're like, I want to be out there with my teammates. He sat down on the bench. And to fine him for that was wild. And then they fined another guy $10,000 for missing a mandatory yoga session. Tom Coughlin was a control freak. He said guys needed to have both feet on the floor during meetings. He needed to wear the same color socks at practice. I kind of understand where Tom Coughlin's coming from. He wanted uniformity. He wanted control, and he wanted things run a certain way. But the reality is he took it too far. He was too strict. And the biggest expectation with Tom Coughlin, the biggest problem with Tom Coughlin was that expectations were not clear. As a player, you never knew what you may or may not get in trouble for. That's a gigantic, gigantic problem for any business or anything. If your employees don't know what's expected of you, that's just a problem. It's a huge flaw. And it seemed like Tom Coughlin would excessively fine guys for whatever amount he felt like was necessary rather than really having clear expectations and being gracious ever. And that's why Tom Coughlin was fired. I think he had good intentions. I think Tom Coughlin was doing what he believed was right. But in the end, Tom Coughlin took things way too far with the Jacksonville Jaguars.